Welcome to the Executive Innovation Show podcast, where we bring you real executive conversations with industry game changers and thought leaders. We ask the questions you're thinking, what you're scared to ask, and we make your brain hurt afterward. With your host, Carrie Chitsey Wells, co-founder and CEO of One Touch Video Chat, live video interviews, and the nonprofit Humans Helping Humans.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast. This is part of our nonprofit series. We are going to talk today about spreading youth suicide prevention, one school at a time. Got my co-host and sidekick with me today, Daniel Miller, who is the COO of Humans Helping Humans. Daniel, are you caffeinated and ready?
Yeah, very excited to be here.
Awesome. We have a special guest with us today. We have Clinton Faupel, who's the co-founder and executive director of RemedyLIVE, a web-based crisis center. They provide 24/7 hope and live chat interactions for young adults struggling with the secret issues in their life. They have done over 60,000 conversations a year with youth ages 13 to 24. Since they've been founded in 2014, they've had over 240,000 conversations about personal mental illness with over 85,000 youth. Clinton, amazing stuff. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Carrie. Good to be with you, Daniel.
Awesome. Well, Clinton, we love to hear the backstory. So why don't you tell everybody so they get to know you a little bit better of why you started RemedyLIVE. I think you are 11 years anniversary that you just had or coming up, right? 11 years?
That's right. Yeah, in October we celebrate 11 years. And, in the intro you mentioned since 2014, and we were founded in 2007, but in 2014 we started using our own proprietary software. And so that's why those data points are in the intro. But yeah, 11 years ago, we believed that technology, and back in those days, this is pre-iPhone. In fact, RemedyLIVE launched the same week the iPhone came out. We believed that technology could be used for all of its faults. It could be used for good if you provided the avenue by which people could share their struggles, and then you provided compassionate people on the other end. And so we started with all kinds of different formats. We started in internet radio for a while. We played around with all the different chat applications that were trending back in those days, and really just decided that we were going to jump all in and create our own technologies, hire specialized staff to be listeners in those environments. And our motivation has always been the same, that we want to be a positive destination for people. We want to have meaningful conversations. We want people to know they're not alone, that there's always going to be someone there to walk with them through the struggle and provide presence to whatever they're going through, so that they don't feel like no one understands or no one's there. And it's just been a really great ride, and we're so grateful that 11 years ago we had donors that believed in us. It's just a random fact, but it's just an exciting thing that I can share that 11 years ago, 8 people invested $50,000 each to get us started. And the return on that investment has been just so amazing with how many lives have been saved.
Wow.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. And I can imagine that your approach has really evolved over the years, going from AOL chat rooms and, and that kind of thing into today. Can you talk a little bit about how your approach has evolved from back then until today?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, again, we didn't know what we didn't know. And I think when you're an innovator, you have to remember that failure is part of that equation on a regular basis. And we've always agreed that failure does not need to be a destination. It's just part of the journey. And so we've always tried to learn from things that we've used. And you mentioned AOL Instant Messenger, and Facebook chat kind of launched around the same time that we were getting serious about this. MySpace had just died, or had kind of gone away, and I think it's come back in a different form. But we learned, first of all, that the medium of technology can be safe. It can be faceless. It can be safe. In our case, because we only use text and web-based chat, it doesn't have voice inflection. It doesn't have an emotional that I'm even sharing in my voice right now. It doesn't have that, and so it's very safe. It's neutral in a lot of ways. There could be a lot, of course, things that's wrong about the technology, and that people don't always feel like they can express themselves fully. But done in the right way, where you offer the opportunity for people to come and to just get that confession out of where they're going in their mind or what they're struggling with, great things can happen. And so we've just learned through a lot of conversations, in fact, over 7 million interactions in 11 years, we've learned that, when you just provide that question that we all use every day, that question, that how are you, which I think we might have even said that before we went on air, just how are you?
Yeah.
We don't always mean it. We always throw it out there, but we don't always mean it. But we sometimes are thinking, if I really want to know how the person is, am I going to spend the time actually listening to what they're going through? And at Remedy Live, we will. And when we ask, how are you, we mean it. And we have found that when you ask, how are you, in a chat-based, text-based conversation to someone that is caught in struggle, watch out, because 90 minutes later, you've learned a whole lot about their story, a whole lot about their struggle. And by the end of that 90 minutes, they find that they feel that they can now trust us to give them strategic next steps in order to make their life better than it was. So I guess that's probably the biggest lesson we've learned, is how to ask, how are you, and really mean it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think how we were raised and, our school journey is so much different than it is now. Just seeing the stuff my son goes through, in elementary school, I was like, oh my gosh, we didn't even talk about that kind of stuff till we were in high school, or have to deal with, that kind of stuff. And talking about youth mental health and, what the youth goes through with depression and anxiety and just mental health in general, there's a lot of culture barriers out there. And, in some cultures, whether you're Black, Asian, Latino, Indian, whatever it may be, there's a lot of youth out there that just weren't raised to talk about their mental health issues, or if they're feeling depressed, because it just culturally wasn't something in their family. And you said mental health, it meant you were crazy. And the youth doesn't feel like they can talk to mom and dad. And the same goes with people struggling with sexuality and other things. What are you seeing from your standpoint with kind of the chat lines, and how should moms and dads who listen to this podcast, who are executives and so forth, have these kinds of conversations with their kids?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I just said, that I would much rather, as a father of four myself, have parents asking how are you and meaning it in the confines of a trusted parent-child relationship, so that time is invested. I think that's probably the biggest resource that we need to rethink as parents, is how much time do I invest with my child, so that they know I truly will sit with them and walk through how they're doing, and asking hard questions about anxiety, asking questions about expectations, about how they feel, and it's hard. Depression and anxiety, those words, to some of our kids, and we found this through our Get School Tour program, that a lot of kids, they don't really know what depression means. They think depression's a bad day. They think anxiety is just feeling nervous, when really, these are a lot larger issues. And so to be able to just sit with your child, if you're a parent, and ask how are you, and hear them talk about what it is that is causing them just an overwhelming emotion in a situation, or not feeling like they want to go to school because of being bullied, or feeling sad on an ongoing basis for not just a day or two, but for a week or two or more, to be able to find out that stuff as parent. And what I always tell parents in the workshops I do is that the human face tells a whole lot without the words coming out of the mouth. And so for mom and dad to go in with a real understanding of the way that their face is speaking. Do you truly care about what your child's going to tell you? And do you really care about your child's response, if perhaps it might even cause you to feel a little bit of embarrassment or shame? Because sometimes we as parents feel shamed because we think we should have done more, we should be doing more, and we should. But we also understand that we can't be neutralized by the emotions that we might have. We instead have to be very clear with our child that we care about them so much that we'll do whatever it takes to get them help. And I think that's what we do at Remedy Live, is we will do whatever it takes to staff our chat center, to provide really great listeners, to provide people, and to provide time so that people can unpack their story and know that no matter what time of day, day or night, Christmas Day, it doesn't matter what day, you're going to always find somebody to chat with. So that's just really important for us.
Well, yeah, that's awesome. And around the holidays, I think everybody's talked about, how much call or chat or whatever volume goes up because of mental issues, addiction, all that kind of stuff. But I want to talk about your Get Schooled tour. I know Daniel and I really loved hearing about what you guys are doing, going on campuses and talking to the youth about mental health issues, really breaking down some of those stigmas, and really talking about, kind of what that means. You've done some kind of polling through your, texting technology that you guys are using to really understand a little bit more kind of what's going on with, the youth and asking some questions that really have gotten some great insights. What have you learned so far on your Get Schooled tour? What's coming with the Get Schooled tour in 2019?
Yeah, so something that you said in your last comments is that there's a lot of stigma around mental health. And kids, although a whole lot, I think, more courageous than maybe generations past in wanting to take on these hard issues, there's still a stigma that I'm the only one dealing with issues. I'm the only one that's struggling. And the brain is a peculiar thing, right? Because you and I only know what we think. You and I only know what we're going through. We don't actually realize that other people struggle too, especially when you're an adolescent trying to figure out why you've got hair under your armpits and why things are going, physically different than they were a few years ago. So there's a whole lot going on within that teenage brain. So what we learned through a great partnership in the area that we live, a funder, the Lutheran Foundation, they had done an independent study where they asked schools and they asked families, what the greatest needs were. And they learned that mental health was a major need in both of those worlds. Then they found out that the parents thought the school was teaching their kids about proper mental health, and the schools thought the parents were talking to their kids about proper mental health. And so nobody was really talking to the kids about what it looks like to have strong, good mental health and how to fight mental illness. And so the Lutheran Foundation is a major funder of ours, and they really called us to say, what can we do to work with schools to help them, first of all, help the students know that they're not alone, but second of all, to be able to show them through the technology that in a room of 1,000 kids, there's a lot of people that have a lot in common. And so we learned pretty quickly through our polling technology that that nearly a third of the students, in fact, just under a third of the students, struggled in the last 12 months with suicidal ideation. And so that means of 80,000 students that we polled, 30% have seriously considered suicide in the last year.
It's heartbreaking.
And although it's heartbreaking, yes, it's as a parent you cringe and you get sick to your stomach about it. But what happens, Carrie, in these situations is that we actually see that there's power now in those kids that said yes, they struggle, because they see that they're now part of 300 or so kids in that room,
right, that
have a common bond of strength if they share their confession, if they share their struggle. And so what we're seeing on average is that 5% of the student population is willing to take the immediate next step, which is to talk to a trained therapist at the school that day that we bring in. We usually bring in about 20 people. And so immediate care is provided. It's not therapy. It's not counseling. It's just a consult to be able to say, tell us more about your story. Tell us more about where you're at with your struggle. Then we see 18% of that student body chat into our chat center to see, is this real? Are you guys bots? Are you real human beings? And some of them do get deep into their struggle right away because they have been waiting. They've been begging. They've been praying for someone to ask them how they're really doing and to be able to get that off their chest in a safe way. So we're learning again about just under a third of the students are struggling at that deep issue. The other part that's alarming is that we're seeing that 2/3, 65% of those same 80,000 kids know somebody within their circle of influence, could be a friend, could be a family member, could be someone they play sports with, that has shared with them a struggle with thoughts of suicide. And so that's, again, staggering. 2/3 of 80,000 kids struggle with thinking about it or knowing somebody that struggles with thinking about it. So what we're trying to do with the Get Schooled Tour is, of course, normalize the conversation, bring awareness that we're all in this together. There's more of us than we think struggling with these issues. And then how do we create a network of care so that we are stronger when we leave that school than when we came in?
Wow, the network of care. Yeah, no, that's such incredible work, and congratulations really on launching that and moving that forward.
Thank you.
Wanted to pivot over and talk a little bit about social media. So as we all know, and I think this creates a lot of anxiety for parents as well, social media has created this kind of best moment forward anxiety amongst our youth. That's something that we really didn't have to deal with, and that parents often didn't have to deal with when they were in school. Mm-hmm. So how would you explain, or how would you describe social media as having hurt or helped youth mental health issues?
Well, on the negative side, I would say that it's done a lot in regards to creating a real confusion in a forming teen brain. Last summer, or I guess a year ago last summer, we lost a 16-year-old in our community, and I had the privilege really of interviewing her parents after the funeral to understand better how we can learn from the loss of their daughter. And one of the many things that they shared with us that day that they want us to know is how often their daughter would spend time scrolling on social media to be able to see what others were doing and to be able to kind of figure out where she fit in this great world that we have. And for her, unfortunately, because she was already being bullied as a younger kid, her brain was already wounded with issues of self-confidence. And bullying is a terrible thing because it not only wounds us physically at times, but the trauma it causes to a teenage or child brain is pretty significant. And so this young lady, unfortunately, with all the social media that she was consuming, she concluded that she wasn't important, that she wasn't being invited to people's houses, she wasn't participating with gatherings, she wasn't as pretty as everybody else, and she wasn't able to make the logical leap that most of us can as adults, that those selfies take 20 different pictures to get the perfect one.
Right.
She couldn't do that, and so she ended up taking her life. And so that's the negative side, I think, of social media. I'm even aware of it with my own kids because I spend a great amount of time, my wife and I, dating our children because we never want them to need to find that identity or that confidence from outside of our family. We want them to know who they are and why we love them so much and why they are lovable. But we know that social media is such an amazing catalyst for kids to be able to see all kinds of things, from marketing to what their favorite entertainers are doing. On the positive side, of course, social media has been used to provide courage, again, like we do in the Get Schooled Tour. Social media provides evidence that other people are talking about things that perhaps people have believed or young people have believed no one else really is dealing with. And so there's an upside to it, of course, as well. But I just read a recent study that said that we finally determined through good research that 2 hours is probably the maximum that any teenager should be spending with their screen, because after that, the brain, the frontal lobe especially, is really struggling with shrinkage in the areas where compassion is stored, where empathy is stored, and then also with just prioritizing and processing. And so you can get yourself really upside down with what's important in life and the dopamine rush, the reward center that's often released when we're using our gadgets.
Do you think, Daniel, and that's questions to both of you guys, there's a lot of people that you guys are just making me think. There's a lot of people that say that, when a celebrity commits suicide, that increases teen suicide. So when Robin Williams, or when, who was the 3 suicides that happened like right together? I don't know why I'm blanking on it. The woman that's the purse out of New York.
Yeah, someone in the fashion industry, a real popular musician.
Kate Spade.
I think every industry has had someone, and sadly in recent years. And I think the last one was a CNN personality.
Yeah. The guy that did the travel stuff.
Yeah.
Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah. Anthony, yes. So do you think, Daniel, do you think that once the celebrity does and it's all over the thing, that it makes you think it's like a cool thing to do, or you think it's more of a helps from a prevention? And then I want to get Clinton's take too.
Well, what I think is that what it does is it gets people thinking about it and gets people talking about it.
Right.
And I think that that's why organizations such as RemedyLIVE are so important. If a teen or a young person is thinking about it, they need to have a place to go where they can talk about it with somebody who can really give them some confidence and boost their confidence. And so I'm thankful for organizations such as RemedyLIVE that are there to have those conversations. And I don't know, and Clinton can discuss if their interactions go up when something like that happens. I would definitely be curious to know that.
Yeah, I think when we see a celebrity take their life, I don't believe that we see an increase in suicidal ideation among teens. But I think what we do see is, and I hate to say it because I would never want to take advantage of someone's loss of life, but we see that there's a greater way for us to talk about suicide because somebody in the news media now is being highlighted because of an act of suicide. And so we have had a lot of kids that have come into the chat center and compared their struggle to a struggle of somebody that's taken their life. And there is a lot of, I guess, in many ways, familiarity that those students might have because of someone that's taken their life in the media. But I don't see that there's an increase or copycat like we might see in the schools. In the schools, I think when a child suicides, then sadly, then we do have to worry a bit because a 14-year-old taking her life and then the other 14-year-old survivors seeing how much she's talked about and how much she's loved and how much, her photos are placed on her locker. The 14-year-old brain is not mature enough to realize that you don't get loved more after you're gone, and that's a good thing. The ripple effect of destruction is just hurting people. And so your 14-year-old brain thinks, I can be loved so much more if I just did this act of suicide, which is illogical to our adult brains, but to a teenage brain, they romanticize it so much. And I think that's why shows like 13 Reasons Why are so dangerous, because it's a romantic thing of if I just killed myself, it'd be over. And then finally people would see how, who I really am. And then they would understand why I am the way I am. And the reality is then, and I've buried a lot. I'm an ordained pastor. I've buried teenagers, and it never works out that way. Nobody is better for it. No one is happier or feels like they know that child more now that they're gone. It's always the exact opposite. It's marriages now end in divorce because moms and dads don't know how to deal with it. Kids are significantly pushed into a place where they ask questions of why her, why did we lose her, what could I have done more? It's never ever good. But there is a difference, I think, between what we see in the media with the Robin Williams and with the others that we mentioned, and then those kids that we see in the schools that students know very well.
Yeah, that's that the Netflix show 13 Reasons Why. I noticed that they have these warnings that they put at the beginning of the end of the show. So I'm glad that you brought that up as a concern, and I think that's something that parents should really be concerned about.
Yeah, I think I'm grateful that they did that, but they only did that after there was so much uproar.
Exactly.
And most kids don't. By the end of that show, they don't care to read those things because, again, their brain has been, again, music and media it stirs our emotions, and it's not always a bad thing to have our emotions stirred, of course, but it stirs our emotions often to think this isn't a bad idea. This is actually an alternative. And I think that's where, working with students for 30 years, I don't remember suicide being an alternative as much as it is in the last decade.
Yeah.
I think now it's on the option list. Like it's a whole lot easier to get there because other people have done it. And again, there's this romanticizing that if I do it, then finally they're going to think of me in a better way.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that, Clinton. Wanted to talk about what's to come in 2019, particularly with some of the great initiatives that you have coming up with Soul Mentor. Can you give us a glimpse about what's to come in 2019 and talk a little bit about the Soul Mentor program?
Yeah, so to give some context to why we do or why we're thinking of the next program, we have about 60,000 conversations a year with students all around the United States. And although a majority of those students come once or twice and they're in their struggle and they just need someone to talk to, they oftentimes feel better after they talk with us, and we're just kind of the middleman to get them to the next step of care. But there are a lot of students that find that they don't have the courage to maybe talk face-to-face to somebody, and so they keep coming back to us. And although we are honored that they trust us enough to keep us in their life over a month, 2 months, 6 months, or even a year, that was never our intention. We don't want to continue to be a place where students come and stay in a cyclical place of brokenness or problems with mental illness. And so we want them to break out of that, and we want to help cheerlead them into a place, a network of care. So what we've been talking about and working on is a program we call Soul Mentor. If the daily activity at RemedyLIVE.com is with our Soul Medic team, which is what we call our staff, the Soul Mentor team is meant to be a group of individuals that are more committed to perhaps a 60-day mentoring experience, a daily mentoring experience with a teenager that orbits around things like identity. Who are we? What makes us us? But then more specifically, what trauma points do we have in our young life that's caused us to even go to RemedyLIVE? What's even caused us to want to talk about these issues that we're struggling with? And we call them trauma points because there's a whole lot of great science now around the fact that children that have grown up in trauma oftentimes don't even know how their lives are shaping up. They don't know how much the childhood abuse or the things they've gone through within their home life, whether it be emotional neglect or whether it be their parents participating in drugs or alcohol. They don't realize that those things have formed their view of themselves. And so the Soul Mentor process starts with an understanding of who I am as a self, as an individual. And then because we're faith-based, we would work with the parent. We would work with the parent of that teenager to get permission to do what we really don't do very often at RemedyLIVE, and that's to ask questions about their faith and about what they believe in by way of something bigger than themselves. And we know that so often kids don't believe that there is a higher power or that there's anything bigger than themselves when it comes to a religious definition. And yet studies show that faith is a major part of understanding hope and understanding that there's something bigger that can help me through life. And so we want to introduce them to what we believe would be that next step of getting deeper into an understanding of who God is. And because we're a Christian organization, we want to help them understand that there's all kinds of wonderful things that come out of the Christian tradition that can help them know that they can live their one and only life to the full. And the next part is the most important part, I think, of the soul mentoring part, and that's to introduce them into community and to find them human beings in their zip code that would help them take the next step, to actually get them into therapy if needed, or take them into a youth group or a YMCA group, or take them just literally into a school-based, extracurricular program that allows them to go from virtual into physical. And it's not that we don't want to support them in the digital, and we'll always be there for them, but we believe that the soul mentor's role is to, first of all, help them see themselves, help them see who God is and how God wants to help them, and then give them that community of people that can really care for them in their community where they live to make sure that they don't live in isolation anymore. So that's the objective of the Soul Mentor program. We're trying to raise some capital around that because everything, especially when you create technology, costs money. And so we're in the stages of casting that vision and figuring out the blueprint of all that in the business plan. But we're excited that that's a logical next step of our strategic plan.
Yeah, definitely getting them in that tribe. We have another cool podcast talking about the tribe effect, and good to hear that another advocate of getting the youth in a tribe from that perspective. Well, Clinton, it was so awesome to have you on the podcast today. I want to tell everybody where they can go. Go to RemedyLIVE.com. You can go to GetSchooledTour.com to see more about the Get Schooled Tour. And Clinton, tell us the number to text for the text suicide line for the youth.
Yes, within the United States, the number is 494949. If you simply text that 6-digit number and type in hello or type in anything that you want to do in regards to starting a sentence, someone's going to respond to you. There's going to be a couple of registration questions just to create an anonymous profile for you, but we want to make sure that we meet you where you're at. So 494949, and I encourage anybody listening, if you're a parent, take it for a test drive so you can understand what we do. And if we can help you in any way, visit our website so that we can take next steps with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of really cool stuff on RemedyLIVE.com that talks about some of the things that youth is going through and some resources and so forth. So even if you don't have a kid that's come forward that you think is not struggling today, if you're a parent, you should at least educate yourself and go look at that information and get a little more educated at what some of the youth are going through, to not, kind of turn a blind eye. So as a parent looking at it, I was like, oh, wow, this is some pretty good information. So go check that out. Well, Clinton, thanks so much for being on the show. Please write in if you have any questions for Clinton. If you have any questions on the topic today, please let us know and we'll get you those answers. Please rate and review the podcast. And please share the Youth Suicide Prevention podcast. I usually don't ask people to share podcasts, but we really need to get the word out with the youth and highlight the nonprofits that we have on the show. So please, if you feel inclined, you've heard things today that you really think have touched you or touched others, and you'd like to spread the word, please share it. Anything else, Daniel?
No, Clinton, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to speak with you today.
You both. It was great. I really appreciate the opportunity. And again, anyone listening, if whether it's we can support you or whether you want to bring the Get School Tour to your community to help fight some of these mental illness issues we're talking about, we'd love to chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Clinton. We appreciate you being on the show.
This podcast has come to a close. To hear more from the Executive Innovation Show podcast, subscribe, submit questions, and share the love. Follow us on social. We're everywhere.